April 8th in history. In 1341, medieval Italy buzzed with Renaissance ideas. Scholars rediscovered ancient glory, and one poet stood above all others, Francesco Petrarch. On April 8th, Petrarch ascended Capitoline Hill, where senators crowned him with laurel, the first poet so honored in Rome since the empire's fall. A crowning ignited humanism across Europe, elevating poets as civic heroes and inspiring centuries of literature, art, and Renaissance thought. In 1492, Florence was the crown jewel of Europe, a city alive with art, philosophy, and power, guided by one extraordinary man. On April 8th, Lorenzo de' Medici died at his Careggi villa, aged just 43, taking Florence's golden age with him. Lorenzo had shaped Western civilization itself, mentoring Botticelli and Michelangelo, making Florence humanity's greatest creative engine. In 1820, on the sun-drenched Greek island of Milos, a peasant farmer named Yorgos Kentrodas worked the rocky Aegean soil, unaware of what lay hidden beneath. Kentrodas unearthed a marble figure split into pieces, an ancient goddess, armless and serene, dated to 130 BC. French ambassador Dumont d'Urville secured her for France. Installed in the Louvre in 1821, the Venus de Milo became a global symbol of classical beauty, her missing arms only deepening the world's fascination. In 1904, Britain and France stood at a crossroads. Centuries of rivalry over colonies in Egypt, Morocco, and beyond had kept Europe's two great powers in perpetual tension. On April 8th, diplomats signed the Entente Cordiale in London, resolving colonial disputes and ending centuries of Anglo-French antagonism in a single historic accord. The Entente forged the Allied alliance that won 2 world wars. It remains the cornerstone of the enduring partnership between Britain and France. In 1913, American democracy faced a crisis. State legislatures chose U.S. senators, breeding backroom deals and rampant corruption across the country. On April 8, 1913, the 17th Amendment was ratified. For the first time, American citizens would directly elect their own senators at the ballot box. The amendment reshaped American democracy permanently. The Senate became directly answerable to voters, weakening political machines and advancing the progressive era's democratic ideals. In 1935, America was deep in the Great Depression. Millions were jobless, breadlines stretched for blocks, and despair gripped the nation from coast to coast. On April 8th, President Roosevelt signed the Emergency Relief Appropriation Act, committing nearly $5 billion and creating the Works Progress Administration to put Americans back to work. The WPA built highways, bridges, and schools while funding art, theater, and literature. It employed over 8 million Americans and left a legacy still visible across the country today. In 1952, the Korean War raged on. American steel mills hummed around the clock, supplying the front lines, but a massive labor strike threatened to shut everything down. President Truman signed Executive Order 10,430, directing the federal government to seize and operate the steel mills directly, invoking wartime necessity to keep production running. The Supreme Court struck down the seizure as unconstitutional. The landmark Youngstown ruling permanently limited presidential wartime power, a cornerstone of American constitutional law. In 1964, America was racing to the moon. NASA needed a bridge between Mercury and Apollo, a spacecraft that could master orbital rendezvous. On April 8, Gemini 1 roared into orbit atop a Titan II rocket. The uncrewed capsule proved the spacecraft's structural integrity in the vacuum of space. Gemini's success unlocked spacewalking and orbital docking, the critical skills that carried Apollo astronauts all the way to the moon just 5 years later. In 1973, the art world lost its most transformative voice. Pablo Picasso, aged 91, had spent 7 decades reshaping how humanity sees itself. On April 8, Picasso died of pulmonary edema at his Mougins villa. He had painted until his final days, leaving behind over 20,000 works. Picasso's cubism shattered centuries of perspective. His Guernica remains the defining anti-war image. He forever changed what art could say. In 1974, Hank Aaron stepped to the plate in Atlanta, carrying the weight of history and years of death threats on his shoulders. On April 8th, Aaron launched his 715th home run off Al Downing, surpassing Babe Ruth's record that had stood for nearly 40 years. Aaron's record stood for 33 years. His courage against hatred made the achievement a landmark of perseverance and civil rights in American sports. In 2005, Rome fell silent. Pope John Paul II had died, and millions of faithful began streaming toward Vatican City to bid farewell to a pontiff who had shaped the world. On April 8, 4 million mourners packed St. Peter's Square. Over 200 world leaders stood side by side, the largest gathering of heads of state in recorded history. 2 billion people watched worldwide. John Paul II's funeral became a symbol of his extraordinary reach, a man who had united humanity across borders, faiths, and politics. In 2010, the Cold War's nuclear shadow still loomed. The US and Russia each held thousands of warheads, a fragile peace built on mutual deterrence. On April 8, Obama and Medvedev signed New START in Prague, pledging to cut deployed nuclear warheads to 1,550 each within 7 years, the most significant arms deal in 2 decades. New START symbolized a reset in US-Russia relations and renewed global hope for nuclear disarmament. In 2001, Windows XP launched and quietly conquered the world. By 2014, it ran on hundreds of millions of computers across hospitals, banks, and governments. On April 8, 2014, Microsoft pulled the plug. No more security patches, no more updates. Millions of machines were now frozen in time, exposed and undefended. The fallout lasted years. Hackers exploited unpatched systems. The 2017 WannaCry ransomware attack hit hospitals still running XP, crippling critical care worldwide.